held accountable.
Does the left want to silence hate speech that they hate? Stated differently, are there groups that would want to make it unlawful for the organizer of this rally to have said what he said about white supremacy into that microphone?
Absolutely. I think that this exists on both sides. We were talking about this before the show started as well. There are snowflakes that live on the left and snowflakes that live on the right. And I think a real dearth of understanding of what the Constitution actually protects for Americans and their rights there.
In this country and should not be honored. And I think
should Princeton University remove statues to Woodrow Wilson because by today's standards he was a virulent racist who separated the military and the federal workforce on the basis of race and gave the whites the better jobs and the better life?
I mean, I think that's an interesting debate. I think Georgetown University had this debate a couple weeks back, and they changed their building names, right? Because some of their buildings were once slave owners.
Right.
And
in case you're wondering, I'm Judge Andrew Napolitano in for Kennedy tonight. And first, the continued fallout from this weekend's deadly violence in Charlottesville, Virginia. Attorney General Jeff Sessions has now vowed to defend protesters against, quote, hatred and bigotry, and promised to take vigorous action to defend the rights of Americans. But should protecting the First Amendment be the primary goal and lesson after Charlottesville? Let's bring in my panel. America in the Age of Trump co-author and Fox News contributor Jessica Tarlov, Townhall.com political editor and Fox News contributor Guy Benson, and comedian and host of Abe Lincoln's Top Hat podcast. Is that really the name of it? Ben Kissel. All right, Jessica, starting with you. Did I go wrong in my comments earlier that the First Amendment protects hate speech?
No, you did not, by the definition, though. I would say that the events of this last weekend and the last couple of years have made, I think, a number of sane people consider that topic more seriously. I know we're not rewriting the Constitution here, but it is certainly complicated when you think about the implications of some speech in causing bodily harm if police lay back, for instance, and let things get out of control. So,
Guy, we don't know why the police laid back, but we know that they did. We saw it on the tape, and they admitted it in the press conference yesterday. Isn't the police laying back their failure to protect the speaker, their failure to protect the audience, and didn't it materially contribute to the melee that resulted in somebody's death?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to blame the police for what happened. I blame the criminal for what happened. But when you have these groups coming together, there's going to be clashes. And I think if this was the first time this had happened, maybe you cut a little bit more slack to law enforcement. But we've seen over the course of various cities and different events, when you get these sort of right-wing fascists and these left-wing fascists together, some of them are out for blood. They are out to attack each other. And I think in order to protect the peaceful protests, even among those who hold vile views, you need to have the police do their job and prevent, as you say, that heckler's veto.
And the job of the police is to make sure the speaker can be heard, the audience can hear him, and the audience can respond to him without violence.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, the people who attended this alt-right Nazi fascist rally were Confederate cosplayer nerds who dress like assistant coaches. They are abhorrent and horrible human beings, and their First Amendment right only goes so far, but as soon as they infringe on another person's First Amendment right via violence, it's out the window, and they need to be held accountable.
Does the left want to silence hate speech that they hate? Stated differently, are there groups that would want to make it unlawful for the organizer of this rally to have said what he said about white supremacy into that microphone?
Absolutely. I think that this exists on both sides. We were talking about this before the show started as well. There are snowflakes that live on the left and snowflakes that live on the right. And I think a real dearth of understanding of what the Constitution actually protects for Americans and their rights there. Now, would I personally wish that I didn't ever have to hear from a Richard Spencer again? Yes, absolutely. But I do respect his right to say peacefully whatever it is that he has to say.
How dangerous would it be if Jeff Sessions could prosecute Spencer for his speech?
Very, very dangerous. And that's the point that I keep making to my friends on the left who have this impulse to shut down speech that they don't like, from the deeply offensive to the far less offensive, right? There's a lot of snowflakery sort of across the
new term in the Urban Dictionary.
Words all the time.
No, but I think that you're exactly right. Once you start giving the government the power to decide what speech, beyond direct incitement, what speech has to be shut down or could be prosecuted, I think that is a path that absolutely we should not traverse as a country.
Guy points out the left's problem with free speech, and I pointed out the right's problem with free speech multiple times. I was on Tucker Carlson's show defending Kathy Griffin. I defended Stephen Colbert. They tried to shut me down. I got death threats, the entire thing. There is a massive majority of people in this country who want both sides to get with it and understand the Constitution.
They need a lesson in the First Amendment. And
that's right.
We might be coming to one. Yesterday, President Trump made his first return to New York City since taking office, but his arrival was not well received by some outside of Trump Tower.
Against Trump, no KKK, no fascist USA. No Trump, no KKK, no fascist USA.
Thousands of protesters gathered outside the president's Midtown Manhattan residence last night in response to his remarks on the Charlottesville violence on Saturday. Many say the president didn't initially go far enough in condemning white supremacists, something he eventually did do yesterday afternoon in the White House. The president's motorcade took him on a route that avoided the protest in front of the building's main entrance. Should he have articulated the names of the group? Should he have been as direct on Saturday as he was on Monday?
Absolutely. I really don't know many people who feel that he would have been hurt or his message would have been hurt by saying neo-Nazi or white supremacist. No one disagrees with the fact that hateful groups on either side of the aisle, if they do even have political
What does the
affiliations,
left
are problematic.
say, what do your friends on the left say is the reason why he didn't say neo-Nazi, KKK, white supremacists until after a battering ram of criticism pushed him there?
Well, some say it's because he's fundamentally a racist, and he has a long history of racial discrimination, even going recent comments even about the Central Park Five, for instance, Judge Curiel. I mean, he puts down minority groups constantly, certainly did on the campaign trail. I would say that other people, more kind of balanced people, would say it's Steve Bannon, who did not want him to call them out by their name there. And then another explanation is just that he's weak, and he thinks about these people as part of his base. And the truth of the matter is there aren't enough of them to constitute your base.
Guy, could he have said anything on Saturday that would have avoided the criticism that came from the mainstream media?
Some of it, yes. Right? So there's an element of the left and the press that will attack him no matter what he does.
Okay.
They will look for any possible reason to come after him, and nothing will be good enough. But over the weekend, it wasn't good enough.
Yeah, it wasn't even close to good enough. And the fact that we have to pull teeth to get our president to denounce white supremacists and Nazis is ridiculous.
Why do we have to pull teeth? Is
Because
it
it is
Steve
the-
Bannon,
it is-
as Jessica says, or is it the president's
It is a
personal
man
inclinations?
sitting at 34% approval rating 7 months into a presidency. He is absolutely terrified of losing this very solidified base that will support him no matter what.
But
And
there are
if
only
they
like
turn their back
5
on
of
him, he's
them.
done.
Yeah, there's so few of them. But no,
When you're at 35%, 5% matters.
Here's the thing.
Got it. Hang on. We'll start with you, Guy. Meantime, the Justice Department has reportedly requested details on visitors to a website that is often used to organize protests against President Trump. That's according to TheHill.com. According to the report, the DOJ asked the web hosting provider DreamHost to hand over the IP addresses of as many as 1.3 million visitors. Investigators are said to want access to contact info, email content, and photograph. DreamHost is refusing to comply, arguing it would have a chilling effect on free speech. I think they have a case.
Yeah.
Mr. Benson.
No, this is really distressing.
Could you imagine if Eric Holder did this to protect,
Exactly.
keep the crowds away from
No,
Barack Obama?
We'd be going crazy here, right? So a few points. First, we do have a left-wing violence problem in America. There have been riots. If the FBI or the DOJ wants to go after specific people who incited riots and prosecute a crime, they can get a warrant, a narrow warrant to go after those people. Asking for the IP addresses of more than 1 million people, apparently, because they visited an anti-Trump website, I am absolutely not comfortable with that at all.
Can you school the Justice Department right now in the Fourth Amendment and the First Amendment and what they're doing by demanding to know the ID of everybody that goes to a website? What kind of a chilling effect would that have?
It would be horrible, but Jeff Sessions definitely doesn't call me to talk about any of these matters. And the president, I'm sure, is not a fan of mine at all, since we know that he's watching right this moment. It's disturbing. It's something, as you say, that if this had happened with Eric Holder, the right would be exploding. And I think a lot of the left would be as well. When you say there are left-wing violent groups, I would say that a lot of those people are actually anarchists and are not left-wingers in the traditional sense. But I do take, they're nothings, right?
Yeah.
They just want to cause trouble.
Why are they doing this? Why are they trying to get away with it?
This is just total hypocrisy from the right, who promised to be limited government. That's one of the
I'm not
focal
right.
points.
I'm not being hypocritical
That's
at all.
a focal point for many people on the right who supported Donald Trump.
When you say on the radio, you're talking about Jeff Sessions. You're not talking about Guy Benson because he attacked it.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Right.
Jeff Sessions is one of the worst attorney generals in U.S. history. He has massive government overreach multiple times when it comes to states' rights regarding the legalization of marijuana, wanting to infringe on states' rights to legalize such drug. This is really a situation that is a complete slap in the face to libertarians and conservatives who supported Donald Trump.
Just 10 seconds. You were not surprised when you learned this morning that they did this.
It was not shocking, no, because it's a history that Jeff Sessions has shown over and over again.
And the president himself, who says that he loves and respects the First Amendment, but clearly has no such love or respect for it.
Got it. The panel returns a little later, but first, the deadly violence in Charlottesville causing protesters and politicians in some southern states to ramp up efforts to remove Confederate statues. Yesterday, demonstrators in Durham, North Carolina, yanked down a statue that had been there since 1924. Police say those responsible could face vandalism charges. But now the important question is that while you can tear down a monument, is it possible or even right to try and erase its history? Let me bring in the host of the Richard Fowler Show, Fox News contributor, and my friend, Richard Fowler. Let's get right to it. We probably disagree on this, but I want you to change my mind if you can.
I will try my best, Your Honor.
Can we really erase memory? And if it's a bad memory, don't we want it to hang around to remind us to a place to which we should never, ever go again?
Well, we can't erase memory, but I think memory belongs in textbooks and museums. And my grandmother, I don't know if she was the historian who came up with it, but she would always say to me, you never want to forget where you came from because you have the ability to repeat it again, right? So we need to remember what the Civil War represents, which is 400 years of enslavement of African American people. So we don't want to forget that. But the ideal of statues and monuments and memorials, honoring these generals who believed in this ideal is wrong. We can commemorate it, but we cannot honor it.
But for you and me, who condemn slavery with every fiber of our being, it's not honoring them. It's almost mocking them. It's almost reminding us of the futility and horror of their cause. And don't we want to be reminded of that more frequently than when we consult a textbook? Stated differently, isn't it only dictators that try and change the memory of history?
Well, yes and no to that. I mean, I think let's put this Gucci on another foot if we can. I don't think I think it would be shocked. I think would be shocked, Judge, if we were walking down the streets of Berlin and we saw a statue of Hitler in the middle of the town square, or if we were walking down the streets of Johannesburg and we were to see a monument to apartheid. We would be shocked by that. So the ideal that here in America we have monuments and statues to the Civil War, that should sort of bring up that same feeling of shock and that same feeling of horror.
All right, good.
And that's why people are making the argument that these statues need to come down, not today, not tomorrow, not next month, not next year, not after a law, right now.
Okay, a good argument. But let me ask you this. Where does this stop? I mean, weren't the pyramids built by slaves? Wasn't the White House built by slaves? Didn't Jefferson and Washington and Madison and Monroe all own slaves? Should we wipe all of that from our memory, too?
Well, here's the thing. I don't think we can erase slavery in the United States. There's no question. I think our founders call it a very peculiar institution. So we can't erase it from American history. But the fact that there were individuals in this country that literally fought to keep it around, and some of their quotes are legendary, talking about why we should protect it and why people like me are subhuman and we're not equal, right? Those individuals and their statues should not remain in this country and should not be honored. And I think...
Should Princeton University remove statues to Woodrow Wilson because by today's standards he was a virulent racist who separated the military and the federal workforce on the basis of race and gave the whites the better jobs and the better life?
I mean, I think that's an interesting debate. I think Georgetown University had this debate a couple weeks back, and they changed their building names, right? Because some of their buildings were once slave owners.
Right.
And the university said, listen, we're going to change all of our building names to reflect the fact that Georgetown University does not represent slave owners. That's not who we are today. And while we were once a place that represented those individuals, that's not who we are today. That does not reflect our student body, and that does not reflect who we are as a community. So this is a debate that's happening all across the country. And frankly, what we saw happen in Charlottesville and these neo-Nazis and this ideal of white supremacy can only exist in an era where we continue to prop up this type of ideal of slavery and white supremacy.
Really quick, we got about 10 seconds. Should people take it into their own hands and destroy these statues, or should they wait for the government, which owns them, to do so?
Listen, when the government fails to act, sometimes the people have to. So I give a big shout out to the people in Raleigh-Durham for taking down that damn statue.
You know I love you, Richard. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure, man. Coming up.